It was a chilly early fall evening here on the lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Tsuut'ina Nation, Yitka Nakota First Nation, and more recently, the Otipemisiwak Métis. And we were recording at Star 6 Ranch with Daryl Kootenay at the Food Sovereignty Camp hosted by Howl. Check them out, experiencehowl.com. They're doing amazing things. So, the Ancestral Science podcast learned so much from this episode, such as the science of smoke, the patience and resilience needed to live on the land, Indian popcorn, the science of tending to the flame, the need for multiple freezers, how smoke is the traditional Gore-Tex, and how food sovereignty can bring people together and really is a massive step towards reconciliation. So don't mind our chilly nose sniffles. Okay, now imagine the smells of campfire and smokehouse smoke woven alongside laughter and stories. So without further ado, the Ancestral Science Podcast welcomes Daryl Kootenay. Well, welcome to the Ancestral Science Podcast. We're here on these beautiful lands, which I'll ask you to talk about in a moment. But first, to offer you tobacco for your time and your wisdom and sharing that here today. Hi.
Oh.
Do you want to introduce yourself in your own way and where we are?
Sure. Ambo Astich, Dagunchawa, the Tanko Agichi, Wacha, Toganaki, Itancha, me and Gibby. I introduced my two names that were given to me. First is Tatanka Wagichi, which in Stony Nakota, Iyithka, means dancing buffalo, and that was my great grandpa's name. And my second name is Wacha Toganaki Itancha, which translates into the one that leads with his heart. My English name is Daryl Kootenay, and born and raised right here in Minithni, Oyede, Coldwater Nation. I'm also half Navajo Dene on my dad's side from New Mexico, a part of the Nakai Dene clan. And yeah, today's a very beautiful day, and we're here in just right on the border of Minithni, on the western, just down below us, there's the river, and right behind us, those trees, a reservation just across the cliff there, and we are gathering in a place that's got a lot of significance spiritually on these lands that are no longer a part of our community. Friends of ours of the Star 6 Ranch, there's old Sundance remnants of an arbor just over the hill here, and to this day we still find old things in the ground here. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what is happening? What is happening here today? There's lots of awesome science and food and delicious, and we are surrounded by different kinds of smoke.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, in my observations in my community, as someone who's an outdoorsman who hunts, who gathers, but also interested in my own identity and culture, and also as a faculty member, as an educator, I'm always looking at how significant our community is. And today, my role as a co-executive director for the Howl Experience, we created this program called Harvesting Spirit. And today and yesterday was an outdoor land-based component of the program where we're learning about food sovereignty, food security, and indigenous knowledge. The first part of the program, we're in more of a Western science environment. We're learning more about food sovereignty and food security and how it applies today. And then yesterday and today, we're exploring more of what indigenous peoples, and specifically my community of the Arhe Nakota, would practice a form of food sovereignty and food security through our indigenous knowledge, practices. So growing up, I've noticed that what we call a Yithka or stony camp is something that families do year round. And um, when I say year round, I mean there's a certain part of the year that a family would go out into a certain location that they have significant connection to and would set up camp, and they would live there for a week or two, and family would come and drop in. Some would stay there the whole duration. During that time, they would work on, hides, they would process meat, they would go hunting, they would gather and really just be in an environment that's very close to the way, I'd say we used to live on the land in our teepees. And this is something that is practiced within our community. And I've been honored to join a few. And so, through this program, I thought it was a great idea to try and create that environment with these participants who are from across Canada, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to understand more of how we bring that to life through food sovereignty, food security, and that's the whole reason why we're here today. And to me, it's great because today was a beautiful day to see that happen. Many people were dropping in. The participants are here for the full duration, and some people came in to, just visit for a little bit, have some coffee, some tea, say hello, and go about their day to day. And that's usually what happens at these camps. And people talk about all different things, and in the background, and as we're visiting, we're also doing, some processing. So today was really a special day in that sense, and how that really did come alive today. Yeah.
There's a lot happening over there, and I love this. There's you were learning about the science first, and but then doing it, you're experiencing it.
Mm.
And do you want to talk about the different things that are happening here?
Yeah. So, I think first off, just setting up a camp was the first thing, which I think people take for granted, and don't think about the whole process. And that's kind of what we did, was to set up camp. And we have canvas tents, and we have wood stoves and individual tents, and then we have a smokehouse that we need to create, and get a kitchen going and a meeting space. And that takes time, and people are used to having that already set up, but we came to an empty space and created those spaces together, um, which contributes to that environment that for us is essential to learning many different things. And there's also different, kind of practices and processes that we're doing. And specifically, one of the main things that we're doing through both days is making what we call wachitha, dry meat. And the first um, uh, kind of hands-on, besides setting up the camp, was to work directly with the meat and meat cutting, and learning how to, very accurately, very, you know, um, uh, very carefully cutting these very thin pieces of meat that can then be put into a smokehouse, where there's smoke that's essentially drying um, this meat that we would then use as kind of a basis for many other foods that we would then use primarily within what we would call our memorial feasts, or any kind of feast. Um, and what you thought, it takes time, and that's one of the things we're doing. And when you make what you thought, you're kind of babying and watching the fire, because you need a certain level of flames, you need a certain amount of smoke, but you don't want a full on fire, and you don't want no flames at all, or no fire or no smoke. So you're kind of in the middle, which takes a bit of learning by doing. And
Is
while you're
someone always in there?
someone's watching it. Sometimes, when we first got it going, a few of us were sitting in there, and
Yeah.
it was
Stay off.
bearable.
Yeah.
And then there came a point where you just couldn't see the meat anymore. You couldn't see each other, and we had to get out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Um,
I was in at one point where it was there's a lot of smoke.
and while you're doing that, you can do many other things, because that's 24 hours minimum of smoking meat. And I like to do that when I'm at home. I kind of take care of things outside that need to be, when I don't, when you make wachitha, you dedicate, good 2 days of just staying close to that fire. to that smoking process. And so we thought it would be great to work on some of the hides that we're doing here. And so we have an elk hide and a moose hide that we were working on today specifically.
Did you hunt
And
those?
yeah, so those so there's two stories because there's two hides. The first one is a young bull elk that me and my brother and our good friend from Standing Buffalo, we went up to the mountains in the north, and we stayed there for the week. And very beautiful place, running into all the different elk. We were being picky, long story short, and early mornings, go home or go to the camp, sleep, get back up for the evening, and just repeated it. And it was most beautifulest place, much like where we are right now. We were running into grizzly bears. We were, interacting and living in the environment. And on the last day, the last morning, um, we went out and there was really nice fog just covering the meadows, and we seen these elk, and we pursued them. And I went after. We split up into two groups, and my brother and our buddy from Standing Buffalo stayed on this one elk, and we watched the whole thing from far. Me and my other buddy. We weren't too sure because it was a young bull if we were gonna harvest it or not. But because it was our last day, we were there for meat, and we weren't picky during that time because it was our last morning. And so we saw the bull. We called together, and at the end of the day, at the end of that morning, about 7:30 in the morning, my brother shot this young bull elk, and then we carried it out and packed it and brought it home. And so that hide is the one we're working on today. The other moose hide is actually our relatives, our neighbors next door went hunting yesterday, and they harvested a moose, and they don't have the resources and knowledge to process a hide, or utilize the head or the brains or the nose of a moose, and they left it out there. And my brother was just asking them, and they actually showed my brother. They went for a drive this morning to go back to where the kill site was, and my brother picked up those things and brought them here, and we're able to use them. It's a big part of our hunting ways is we try not to waste as much as we can. um, and as dancers, as singers, as uh, um, individuals that work on hides, I myself, educator that uses the hide and the parfletch leadership journey at many different levels. The hide's really important. It's the main teaching tool. So for us, that's a big source of many different things that contribute to our lifestyle, but also helps many other people. So
So you'll be
um,
using that later.
yeah, we'll be. I mean, it's so new, and I didn't know if they were gonna find it this morning. And my brother just said, "I'm on my way. I found it." And so we haven't even talked about what it's gonna
Okay.
go towards. But the elk hide, um, usually my brother will brain tan it, and we'll be able to have some smoked hide, which then could be used as like moccasins and moss bags and knife cases. And I'm actually wanting to work on a pipe bag,
Ooh.
and so that's something I've been telling myself all summer. And so hopefully I'll get going on that this winter.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we saw I think it was your brother that was, taking the brain from I guess
Hmm.
from the moose, and then also we saw the, how the significance of the nose as well of the moose.
Yep.
And what else is happening over there? There's scraping the hides and making tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the tool making and how this relates to food sovereignty and food security is, um, so many people today in society go into town, they go to a grocery store and they purchase their products for food, which then they process at home. Well, yesterday and today is really um, in that process of making our food. But not only that, it's our clothing and our tools and kind of
Mm-hmm.
necessities. And so at the same time, we are making some very significant recipes like Indian popcorn, what we call gapumi, as many people know it as pemmican today. We have some elk stew that's going to be shared tonight. Um, you know, it's this
Mm-hmm.
whole process of how do you preserve those cooking methods that are very significant to your identity and culture, and how can you at the same time show these young people how much work and how much time goes into it, where today's society in many ways is easy and we're spoiled and we could go into a grocery store and purchase these things, and that's that. We're here 2 full days of just working. These young people are definitely understanding that this way of living, it was very harsh, and that indigenous peoples in general are very strong because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this at the end of the day, we have a debrief. We talk about the day because it's so hands-on, and so much learning happening, that if we don't take that time to sit in circle and ask, what was significant to you today, how did today relate to food sovereignty, food security. What I love about this group is that all of them carry a certain experience in food sovereignty and food security already. Some of them are in waste management in their own communities, and they carry a certain knowledge and experience that all we have to do is create a space for them to talk about it and
Mm-hmm.
share it. And so, really creating that community to help each other is what we're also aiming to do, which I believe our Stony camps do naturally as well. It's we're visiting, but we're also sharing techniques and stories of how we process things, and bringing
Mm-hmm.
back those old ways that our grandparents shared with us, and being able to bring them back to life in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Like this is your grocery store and your hardware store
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah.
the pharmacy. What else? Right? And that's what, yeah, it takes a lot of work. And, learning each of those skills and
Mm.
just building a tool from the bone to scrape the hide. I mean, that's very cool.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's I was at this food chef demonstration where he was selling this top of the line pots and pans, me and my wife, and then he asked a question to the audience. He was like, "Who here, cooks with beef? Who eats beef?" And it hit me then because I didn't raise my hand, and I was like, we haven't ate beef in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Of course we do, but like what's in the fridge right now and what was in the fridge that whole year was like elk and moose, and I didn't realize it, but we didn't
Yeah.
we didn't eat a lot of beef, and we still do. So it's
Interesting. Yeah.
it's uh it's really significant that way. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And we were talking with some of the elders earlier, talking about how, and like what you mentioned to me earlier was that it, the amount of smokehouses in this
Mm.
community is so much greater than other communities. And I asked, what was the reason for that? It's like, well, it's about preservation, and it's not, it's different, when you maybe when you hunt so much, and
Mhm.
you're,
Mhm.
how many freezers do you need? Or
Yeah.
but also preserving it by smoking, by how else? Do you use any salt? Or is it just smoking?
No,
Using
there's no
salt, right?
salt. And there's this really, really amazing story of why and how we were shown to make what we call wachitha.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a story I'm going to share tonight with the group.
Okay.
Um, but I really, I think why we have a lot of smokehouses is because of one of our ceremonies that we do, a memorial feast. It's not a like very ceremonial environment. There is prayers that are done at the beginning, with our pahus, with our pipes, but the whole intent is to cook for your past loved one. And the only way that you have a memorial is two ways, from what was told to me by my family, was that you have a dream of your family member who passed on, and in the dream they would say they're hungry. And this happens frequently in our community.
Mm.
And the other one is that after 4 years, the family would already do that naturally. And we believe that in those memorial feasts, you make the old recipes, the old foods, and wachita is a part of that. Gopumi is a part of that. Indian popcorn, like all of these older, and sure you get like a bucket of chicken that's
That's
in there.
also, yeah, that's also important.
You'll get some
Tradition.
cookies, yeah, the sweets,
Yeah.
lots of fruits and berries, and but the goal of that is you want to do what we're doing today and yesterday, because it's when we say you're eating that food, you're giving your past loved one strength, and you're feeding their spirit to do good in that journey that they're on. Um, and that's something that we've been doing out here for a long time, and I think because it's so I would say practiced a lot out here, that a smokehouse is like a necessity. It's almost like in the north with our northern relatives, you need a skidoo to get through all the snow.
Yeah.
Well, you need a smokehouse, out here to contribute to that memorial feast, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And what's the significance of the smoke?
Well, I think what was told to me, is that smoke um, ultimately dries out the meat. You need a certain kind of wood that produces the most smoke. There's a certain kind of wood that gives you a different kind of taste. And this wood ultimately is one that produces this smoke that dries out the hide versus cook the hide, or sorry, the meat.
Yeah.
And and this smoke is not only just for smoking meat. We smoke the hide, and that interaction that it has with meat, and specifically hides, like that's one of the last steps, is you smoke a hide. In many ways puts on a layer of protection, like a coat, that I often say is today's. It was a long time ago. We had our smoked hides. Today you have Gore-Tex. That's our original Gore-Tex, our form of waterproof. Yeah, but also it's a type of scientific reaction that I don't know how to explain scientifically, but I know that it's very crucial. Like you can't have what you thought without the smoke. Yeah.
Yeah, because the wood is really hardwood. It's not like a spruce or a pine, right?
It could be any kind of wood that's rotten. The rotten has a lot to do with it. Um, we're using diamond willow that's rotten, and for some reason this certain willow is very condensed, and it feels super dry, but I believe it's so condensed while it was, it's holding moisture, but you don't feel it. Much like what you would call today like biochar, and what they're using with this certain kind of char that stores a lot of energy. And people are starting to use that today.
Yeah.
And um, I feel like that willow is a form of kind of storing mechanism that just holds moisture, and just produces a certain kind of smoke. But all dead wood that's rotten does that. And some have certain, that's been passed on, certain kind of states of rotten wood that would really increase smoke. Because some rotten wood will just turn into a flame, just burn because of how dry it is. Some will just keep burning and producing smoke. And so my father-in-law really likes using popular deadwood, where a lot of community members out here really like the willow. Yeah. So it's really comes down to you too, on how what kind of flavor I guess you want, what kind of state of meat,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that there's you're smoking to remove the moisture from the meat, right? But also to there's lots of chemistry, lots of we're talking this is all science. You breaking down the animal. I mean, that's all biology. You're not in a lab, dissecting a frog.
Yeah.
This is a lot different than that. But then the chemistry of smoking, and it creates depending on the wood, I think it creates a smoke that creates a layer on the meat that it's formaldehyde, which helps preserve it, right?
Yeah, and I think all wood does that.
Yeah.
And all wood has a little something different that, like for example, my wife Ariel notices that this one certain kind of wood almost leaves like a shiny layer, and it
Like on the meat?
on the meat, and it
Oh.
tastes a little different.
Yeah.
And when we use what my father likes, the popular deadwood, it doesn't do that. And it tastes a little bit, well, popularly definitely tastes like a popular tree.
Yeah.
But they all have a type of layer, and like if you were to just leave that hair or that hide out, it would still create that layer. Like the air has a lot to do with it too.
It's like seasoning of the land.
Yeah, you could call it curing too. Like that layer, it's I'm sure our bodies would do the same. If we were to take our skin off and we were just to stand in the air, we'd probably have a certain kind of layer um, of like tough something or other. But yeah, that's a different conversation.
It's a different conversation.
There.
Is there any connection with like plants and using different, like I've heard juniper or mint or like also being used in preservation? Do you use that in this area?
Not necessarily for smoking. That's used more for other things
Yeah.
that are more ceremonial.
Yeah.
And play a bigger role in that ceremonial um, environment. Um, and some would some families like the juniper rotwood more for smoking hides, not necessarily meat though. Yeah, that's what I like about the smoking meat. You really can experiment a lot. You can really get to know what other families use, and it's a bit of a experimental laboratory, I guess you can say, and it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
Where other things you're more sacred, where there's more process and more prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So smoking meat is really flexible and adaptable in that way. Yeah.
Cool. So what is food sovereignty to you? What does that mean to you?
That's a really good question. I've struggled with that a lot because a lot of my work globally, um, food sovereignty means a lot of different things, and it's hard to really define it. And that was one of the things that I loved about this group, is that in our first group discussion, we asked that. We're like, what is food sovereignty? What is food security? And we all talked about what we thought it was. And we had university students saying that this was the most impactful conversation in all the presentations they got in all their university years. And I think it was the fact that food sovereignty is, for me, is more so the freedom to process what you eat and how you eat it in any way that is relevant to your identity and your culture. Food security for me is how you preserve that. And when you think about Indigenous peoples, our identity and culture is woven and is foundational to food sovereignty and food security in many different ways. And so we even started talking about climate change, and why, when you talk about food sovereignty and food security, we could spend all day talking about it, but the issue is that the climate's changing. And if we don't help with climate change, then what we're trying to preserve and what we're trying to have sovereignty over is going to disappear. So food sovereignty, much like water and water protection, is bringing communities together to look at the bigger picture. One of the things with my work at the United Nations in Rome with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, which I'll be at in a couple weeks, is that this idea that Indigenous communities and this term food sovereignty, food security, is very new. And there are Indigenous peoples from around the world, other parts of the world, who are even going as far as labeling their own type of food processing systems, and that it's an Indigenous labeling system that is significant and very sovereign
like
to their
GMO.
Yeah. And today, who's labeling our food at the grocery store? Who's stamping that?
Right?
And Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here we are, as indigenous peoples eating all this kind of food that's not traditional to this land and is ultimately creating heart disease and diabetes, and our people are, dying from the food that we're eating in the grocery stores,
Yeah. Yeah.
where food sovereignty, food security is going back to those older ways of cooking that ultimately changes your DNA and your genes and leaves you looking really healthy and strong the way the environment,
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you see the future of this, if looking at like urban sprawl and yeah, like you were saying, climate change, and it's impacting like migration patterns,
Mm-hmm.
impacting seasons and length of seasons and temperature and whatnot. How do we, you briefly talked about like how climate change, it's intertwined, but how do we move forward with this, with obviously camps like this, but just in
Yeah,
general?
that came up in our discussion,
Yeah.
and it was related to climate change too. Like at the end of the day, where this is going is that there's an urgency for indigenous values and principles,
Mm-hmm.
indigenous values and
Mm-hmm.
principles, because today's society is based on, everything being a commodity, everything wanting to be purchased and sold, and this idea of claiming ownership
Yeah.
over resources,
Yeah.
that an indigenous way of life is not that way. We believe we're in relation and connection to everything, and that ultimately helps our leadership style. It helps our governance systems. It helps the way we structure and be in relation with everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at those resources and those things in that perspective, which is ultimately our values and beliefs that serve that. And if society today um, doesn't respect or recognize indigenous values and principles, and in many ways use them or adopt them, um, then I don't think we're going to last long
Yeah.
as a people.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think today with this program, and the reason why we created this program is because one of the things that we identified in Rome with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization was that there is no space or program where young Indigenous peoples can go to talk about Indigenous food sovereignty
Mm.
and security. And so I jumped on that right away, and I was like, "How?
You got this.
Let's do this. Let's create a space and place where we could bring young people together to talk about these global issues,
Mm-hmm.
but also, using local, knowledge and
Mm-hmm.
interaction, which again is where the values and principles are, and be able to dive into those." And so um, today, really hard to change, the way Canada's been run since 1867. It's really hard to change the way people move through society in today's urban environments and
Yeah.
rural environments with farming, watersheds, all of
Mm-hmm.
these issues. And ultimately we're trying to change the way people think, and to do that globally, there's just too many people to do that within the time frame of climate change. So
Yeah.
there's a real issue that's huge, and the more you talk about it, the more you recognize it. We're hoping through this program would push young people to start spreading that awareness
Mm-hmm.
and dig deeper into those values and to start talking about them. And of course there's certain ways to you can't just go and adopt indigenous values. You have to like learn to respect them, and learn to um, live with them and be mentored and guided by indigenous communities, and that takes relationship,
Yeah.
and that takes
A lot of
time.
time. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah, so
Yeah. Better understanding that reciprocity, right? Not just taking from the land, but
yeah,
really
yeah,
give back
yeah.
and work together, right? And share the knowledge,
Mm,
like you're doing today,
mm.
and like this camp, and everyone's learning. So, is there anything you want to add?
I would just say that, with the couple days that we had here, and having you guys come out as well, and at the end of the day, the family that and the elders that contributed, it wouldn't be the way it is without them, and very grateful to them, and to our organization with Howl, and to be able to be open to
Mm-hmm.
you know doing things differently, that do, respect Indigenous ways and knowledge, and I encourage, supporters out there to help us out, because this program is a pilot, and we're very thankful for you guys to supporting us as well, and we need more of that. Yeah.
Get all the knowledge out there about what you're doing, what Howell's doing, and so we can move forward in a good way.
Oh,
Hi. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time, Daryl.
Likewise.